The rain had been falling since dawn, a soft coastal drizzle that turned streets into mirrors and the harbor into a painting of blurred reflections. The seaside town of Halawick always looked like it was waiting for a movie to start, slow, nostalgic, slightly faded around the edges. On nights like this, the lamps glowed honey gold on the cobblestones, and the ocean whispered against the rocks like a lover rehearsing an apology. Eli Morgan hadn't been here in 7 years. 7 long years of half-finished photographs, and silent mornings where the kettle whistled, but no one answered. He'd left this town once with a suitcase full of camera, lenses, and promises he didn't have the courage to keep. Now he returned with a camera he hadn't touched in months, and a heart he wasn't sure still worked the same way. The Reyes Gallery stood on the corner of Tides Avenue, where the old lighthouse used to cast its beam. The invitation had come in a simple envelope, no return address, just his name written in a familiar looping handwriting that still haunted the corners of his memory. Eli Morgan, you're invited to the opening of The Night We Forgot to Say Goodbye. He didn't need to check who it was from. There was only one person who would give a painting a title like that. Inside the gallery, the air smelled of paint, wood polish, and rain-soaked wool. Dozens of people milled about in muted tones, and critics, collectors, faces too polished to look like they'd ever been heartbroken. Jazz hummed softly from hidden speakers. The walls were draped with canvases that seemed to glow from within. Oceans under moonlight, empty park benches, city streets after the rain. The kind of art that felt like it remembered something you'd forgotten. And then he saw it. At the far end, under a single spotlight, hung the largest painting in the room. The title card read, The Night We Forgot to Say Goodbye. The painting showed a seaside balcony under a stormy sky, a table with 2 glasses of wine, 1 chair empty, 1 figure standing by the rail, a woman, her back to the viewer, her hair moving in the wind like waves themselves. Eli's chest tightened. His hands felt suddenly cold. He remembered that night, every line of it. He remembered the balcony of her apartment above the bakery, the taste of salt in the air, the way the lights of fishing boats flickered like stars on water. He'd promised her 1,000 things, and that he'd call, that he'd come back, that he'd explain, and then, like a coward, he'd left before dawn, leaving only silence behind. And now, 7 years later, she had painted the silence. Beautiful, isn't it? A soft voice said beside him. He turned. Clara Reyes stood there holding a glass of white wine, wearing a pale gray dress that looked like it had been cut from fog. Time had barely touched her, but it had changed something deeper. There was a new calm in her, a maturity that only heartbreak could carve. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, the noise of the gallery fell away like sound underwater. Clara, he breathed. It was both an apology and a prayer. Eli, her tone was gentle, almost neutral. You came. He nodded, unsure if he should smile. You invited me. I wasn't sure you'd still read my handwriting. He almost laughed, but his throat ached instead. I never stopped recognizing it. They stood there in silence for a few seconds. 2 ghosts meeting where they used to be human. She broke it first. You look older. I feel older, he said. Can you paint? She finished softly. I had to do something. Her eyes flicked toward the painting again. Do you remember that night? He didn't answer right away. The memory was sharp. The fight, the confusion, the way he'd walked away without the courage to say goodbye because goodbyes felt too permanent. I remember everything, he said quietly. Clara nodded. Then the title makes sense. He turned toward her. Did you paint it because of me? She smiled, but not cruelly. More like someone remembering a wound that no longer bled. Partly. Mostly because I needed to put that night somewhere other than inside my chest. The crowd around them shifted. A waiter passed with champagne, and someone laughed near the entrance. The sound felt out of place like a phone ringing in a church. Do you ever wonder, she said softly, what would have happened if you'd stayed? Eli's voice caught. Every day. She nodded as if that was the only answer she expected. Funny, isn't it? How one night can become a lifetime. He looked at her, the soft lines near her eyes, the calm steadiness she carried now. He wondered how long it took her to stop hating him, or if she ever did. Your work is beautiful, he said at last. You always had a way of painting silence. She smiled faintly. You always had a way of leaving it. That one landed like a slow knife, not cruel, just honest. He deserved it. Clara, he said, I didn't come to apologize. She interrupted gently. You don't need to. That's what time is for. I came because, he searched for words, because I wanted to see how you remembered me. Her eyes softened. Then look around. I remembered you in every shade of blue. He looked, and realized every canvas had pieces of him. A lighthouse beam, a blurred figure with a camera, a hand reaching but never touching. She had turned memory into art and art into forgiveness. A clap sounded near the front as someone announced her name for the evening speech. Clara excused herself with a quiet, "Excuse me, Eli," and moved toward the small stage. Eli watched her walk away, graceful, self-contained, untouchable, and he felt the strangest thing. Not regret, not jealousy, but gratitude. Gratitude that she survived him, that she found something beautiful beyond what they lost. He stayed through her speech, her voice steady, words about impermanence and color and how art keeps what time erases. The audience applauded. Cameras flashed. She met his eyes once mid-speech, and for a heartbeat her voice faltered. Then she smiled, and the kind of smile that says, I'm okay now. When the event ended, people began leaving. Eli lingered near the painting again, the one titled after their last night. He touched the frame lightly as if it might hum with memory. Do you want to talk? Clara's voice came from behind him again. He turned. She held her coat now, hair damp from the door's draft. He hesitated, then nodded. I'd like that. Come, she said. There's a cafe across the street. It's quieter there. They walked into the drizzle together, under the yellow glow of streetlights. Across the road, a small cafe with fogged windows and the faint sound of jazz awaited. She led him inside. They took a booth near the window. Steam curled from 2 mugs of coffee. The rain outside turned the night into watercolor. Clara stirred her drink absent-mindedly. You know, I wasn't sure you'd show up tonight. When I sent that invitation, I almost tore it apart the next minute. Why didn't you? She smiled faintly. Because I wanted to see if ghosts read their mail. He laughed softly. And do they? Apparently. Silence settled, comfortable almost. 7 years, she said finally. Do you know how many times I replayed that night? Wondering if I said something wrong, if I should have stopped you. It wasn't you, he said. It was everything else. The fear, the pressure, the feeling that I'd ruin your future if I stayed. So I ran. Her gaze lifted, meeting his. And did leaving save you? He exhaled slowly. No, it only changed the shape of the pain. Clara nodded, eyes glistening with unspilled tears. You know what's funny? The night you left, I painted the sunrise. I told myself if I could capture that light, I'd survive you. And you did, he said softly. Yes, she said. But sometimes survival feels like another kind of goodbye. The clock ticked quietly behind them. Outside, the rain began to ease. Eli looked at her, really looked. The years between them were heavy, but beneath them lay something gentle. Not the fire of love, but the warmth of understanding. Clara, he said quietly, if I could change that night. You can't, she interrupted softly. And that's okay. Maybe we were never meant to last, only to begin. He swallowed the ache in his chest. You make it sound poetic. She smiled sadly. Everything does once it's over. They sat there a while longer, 2 people sharing the quiet that once tore them apart. When it was time to leave, she stood first. Good night, Eli, she said, slipping on her coat. Good night, Clara. At the door she paused, looked back with a faint smile. For what it's worth, that night I didn't forget to say goodbye. I just hoped you'd turn around. Then she was gone, into the misty street, her silhouette fading like a brushstroke into rain. Eli sat there alone, the coffee now cold, the window fogged with his reflection. Outside, the sea wind whispered the same rhythm as before. He realized something. Maybe love doesn't vanish. Maybe it just changes gallery walls. He stood, paid for both coffees, and stepped out into the wet street. Across the road, the gallery lights were dimming. Through the glass, he could still see the painting, the woman by the sea. Her back turned, her hair like waves. He whispered almost to himself, Goodbye, Clara. And for the first time in 7 years, it didn't hurt to say it. The first few days after their encounter passed like smoke in the breeze. Aiden couldn't focus on his meetings, nor the hollow laughter echoing through the marble halls of his apartment tower. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, soaked in rain, clutching a sketchbook as if it were her heart's last possession. He told himself it was just guilt, that he'd only helped her out of pity. But guilt doesn't make your pulse race at midnight. When you recall the way someone smiled at you through pain. 3 days later, he returned to that same bus stop. The rain hadn't come back, but the air carried that same melancholy scent. Wet dust, diesel, and unsaid apologies. He waited, and she came. This time she wasn't drenched. Her hair was tied neatly, her bag seemed fuller, and there was a faint color on her cheeks, the kind that doesn't come from makeup but from a sliver of hope. She noticed him instantly. "You again?" Her voice was softer this time. Aiden smiled faintly. "I forgot to ask. Did the soup survive?" She laughed. The sound was fragile, yet it cracked the silence around them. "Barely, but you were right. It wasn't about the soup." He tilted his head. "Then what was it about?" She looked away. "Maybe learning to let someone care, even for a second." That night, they walked together until the streetlights gave up chasing their shadows. She told him her name, Maya Ellison. She lived 2 blocks away in a half-renovated building that had seen better years. She used to be a painter, small exhibitions, art fairs, teaching kids. But after her husband died, the colors stopped meaning anything. He was a firefighter, she said quietly. The city forgot his name a week after his funeral. I didn't. Aiden didn't know what to say. He had spent years drowning in his own kind of grief, not of losing someone to death, but to betrayal. His ex-fiancée had walked out the night before their wedding, leaving behind a note that simply said, "You love your work more than people." They walked in silence for a long time, 2 broken clocks somehow ticking in rhythm. Days became weeks. What started as coincidence became intention. He began visiting the art center near her place. Pretending he was just passing by, she'd tease him. "You're terrible at pretending," and he'd grin like a man who hadn't smiled in years. Maya started painting again. Slowly, like a wound learning to heal, she began with small canvases. The reflection of rain on rooftops, old women feeding birds, stray dogs finding shelter. The kind of art that didn't sell but spoke to souls instead of wallets. One evening, she asked him to sit for a portrait. He refused at first. "I don't do well sitting still." "Maybe that's why you should," she said, smiling. He sat, she painted. For hours. There was only the soft rhythm of her brush and the faint hum of rain outside. When she finally stopped, she didn't show him the canvas immediately. She just looked at it, her eyes heavy with something like realization. "What?" he asked. She bit her lip. "You look lonely, even when you smile." He didn't respond, because she was right. The portrait became a turning point. It was the first time someone had seen him. Not the successful entrepreneur, not the man who hosted charity galas, but the broken child behind the suits and smiles, and somewhere in that seeing love began to breathe. Not the cinematic kind with fireworks or grand gestures, but the quiet, inconvenient love that sneaks up on people who swore they were done with it. He started staying longer, fixing the flickering bulbs in her apartment, bringing her coffee in the mornings, listening when she spoke about her late husband without jealousy or discomfort. One night, as they watched the rain return after weeks of dry skies, Maya whispered, "Do you ever think love happens more than once?" He thought for a long moment. "I think it never really dies. It just waits for someone brave enough to believe in it again." She turned toward him then and kissed him. It wasn't a desperate kiss. It was soft, trembling, full of apology for the year they'd both lost. When they pulled apart, she said, "Don't promise me forever. Just promise me you'll stay until it stops raining." And for the first time in a decade, he made a promise he truly meant. But love, as it always does, invited the past to knock on the door. One afternoon, Aiden's phone buzzed relentlessly during a meeting. It was his assistant. Panicking. The media had found out about the mystery woman he'd been visiting in the lower district. Photos of him leaving Maya's apartment were plastered all over gossip sites. Millionaire Aiden Cross and secret affair with unknown widow? He rushed to her place, breathless, his chest tight. She was already standing by the window, phone in hand, her face pale. "You should go," she said softly. "Maya, please don't." "I told you," she interrupted, her voice breaking. "You don't belong in this world. Not mine. They'll eat you alive, and I can't watch that happen." He stepped closer, desperation lacing every word. "You think I care what they write? I finally found something real." She shook her head, tears spilling over. "Then you don't understand. Real things break the hardest. He wanted to hold her, to fight, to tell her that love wasn't supposed to bow to fear. But when she looked at him with those tired eyes, he realized she wasn't afraid for herself. She was afraid for him. So he left. And for the first time since he met her, it rained again, but this time, she didn't wait at the bus stop. Weeks passed. Maya vanished from his life as quietly as she had entered it. Her apartment was empty, her paintings gone, her phone disconnected. The city moved on, as cities do. But Aiden didn't. He kept her portrait, the one she painted of him. Every night he'd stare at it, tracing the sadness she had seen before he even knew it was there. Then one morning, as he scrolled through the local art pages, he saw something that made his heart stop. A small exhibition had opened downtown titled When the Rain Forgets to Fall. The artist's name, Maya Ellison. He drove like a madman. The gallery was tucked between cafes, modest and quiet, yet filled with people moved to tears. Her art had changed and still emotional, but brighter now. Every canvas shimmered with color, like she had finally made peace with her ghosts. At the end of the hall there was one painting, larger than all the rest. It showed a man standing alone under a streetlight, looking at a woman walking away in the rain. The title read, "He stayed until it stopped raining." Aiden felt his throat tighten. "She said you'd come," a voice said behind him. He turned. A young gallery assistant smiled softly. "She left a letter. Said to give it to you if you ever found your way here." He took the envelope with shaking hands. Inside, her handwriting flowed like poetry. "You were never meant to save me, Aiden. You were meant to remind me that I could still be saved. Love isn't about forever. It's about finding someone who teaches you how to start again." There was no signature, just a faint watercolor stain at the corner, as if she'd wept while writing it. He looked up at her painting one last time and smiled through the ache. For the first time, he didn't feel lonely, because she was still there in every color, every raindrop, every quiet corner where love once hid. Aiden didn't sleep that night. The letter lay on the table beside an untouched cup of coffee, the city lights flickering through the window like ghosts of moments gone. He replayed her words over and over. "You were never meant to save me. You were meant to remind me that I could still be saved." It wasn't closure. It was an open wound disguised as healing. He sat back on the couch staring at her portrait again. The sadness she'd painted and that hollow stare looked almost peaceful now, as if time had softened the ache even on canvas. But one thought refused to leave his mind. Where was she now? Days turned into weeks. The exhibition ended. Her name started disappearing from the feeds, drowned out by newer, shinier stories. He hired someone to trace her, not out of obsession, but out of something far more complicated, longing mixed with unfinished meaning. He told himself he just wanted to thank her, but deep down, he wanted one last chance to tell her that she was wrong, that love didn't have to vanish with the rain. Weeks later, his investigator returned with a file. One address, the seaside town nearly 200 miles away. "She teaches painting at a local community center," the man said. "Lives quietly. Keeps to herself." Aiden nodded, eyes distant. The next morning, before the sun broke through the clouds, he got in his car and drove. The road stretched endlessly, silver under the dawn light. The radio silent except for the occasional whisper of static. Every mile was a memory. Every exit a hesitation. When he finally reached the town, the air smelled different, salt, seaweed, and healing. He found her easily. The community center was small, painted in pastel blues and yellows. Through the open window he saw her, hair tied back, sleeves rolled up, laughing with a group of children as they painted waves and skies on wide sheets of paper. It was the kind of laughter he hadn't heard before, light, unguarded, free. He didn't step in immediately. He just watched, because sometimes love isn't about arriving. It's about witnessing someone bloom in your absence. When the class ended and the children ran out giggling, she finally saw him. For a second, the world stood still. Her breath hitched. The brush in her hand trembled slightly. Then she smiled, the same soft, rain-washed smile from that first night. "You found me," she said quietly. He took a step closer. "You left a trail of colors. I just followed." She chuckled faintly, shaking her head. "You shouldn't have come." "Maybe," he said, "but I needed to see if the rain finally stopped." She looked down, eyes glistening. It did, mostly. Some days it drizzles again. But that's life, isn't it? He nodded. Yeah, it is. They stood in silence, the ocean murmuring behind them. Later they walked by the shore. The sky was painted in soft oranges, gulls circling lazily over the waves. The sand clung to their shoes as they spoke. Not of the past. Not of pain, but of small things. Her students. His failed business trips. The way rain always seemed to find them, even on sunny days. At one point she turned to him. Do you still paint? He laughed. I never did. You should, she said. It's not about being good. It's about seeing. He smiled. Then maybe you can teach me. She hesitated. Aiden, I'm not here to pull you back, he said gently. I just want to know that you're okay. She looked at him for a long time. Then quietly, I am. And so are you, I think. For the first time, he wanted to deny it, to tell her that he wasn't okay. That part of him still missed her every time it rained. But she was right. Somehow her absence had taught him how to breathe again. They reached the pier, where the horizon stretched like a promise no one needed to keep. Aiden turned to her. You know, I used to think love was something you held on to, like a deal, a commitment, a forever. And now? She asked softly. Now I think it's something you set free. If it comes back, maybe it's love. If it doesn't. He looked at her, smiling faintly. Then it was still beautiful. She nodded, tears glimmering under the sunset. That's the thing about rain. It always returns, but never the same way twice. He reached out then, brushing a strand of hair from her face. The gesture was simple, wordless, and yet it carried years of emotion. She leaned into his touch. For a moment it felt like time folded back, and the world was nothing but that bus stop, that night, that first fragile connection. Then she stepped back. Stay for dinner? He smiled. I'd like that. Dinner was quiet, filled with the kind of ease only people who have already said everything can share. They didn't talk about what they were or what they'd be. They didn't need to. Later that night, as the wind picked up outside, Maya walked him to the door. You'll come back? She asked. He hesitated. If you want me to. She smiled. Come back when it rains. He chuckled. Seems fair. And then, like every great love story, it ended not with a grand kiss, but with a quiet one. The kind that lingers, that belongs not to the lips, but to the memory that stays afterward. Months passed. He did return, and every time it rained. Sometimes they painted together. Sometimes they just sat in silence, watching the ocean turn gray. The world outside never knew their story. It wasn't for headlines, wasn't meant for applause. It was just theirs. And on one late autumn afternoon, years later, when the rain returned heavier than ever, she handed him a finished painting. It was the same moment, the two of them standing by the sea, hands almost touching, the horizon burning gold behind them. At the bottom she'd written the title in tiny cursive letters, When the Rain Forgets to Fall. He looked at her, smiling through tears. It's beautiful, he whispered. She shook her head gently. No, Aiden, we are. That was the story of two souls who met in the ruins of grief, built something fragile from pieces of the past, and taught the rain how to fall again. They didn't need it forever. They only need it now. Because sometimes, that's all love ever asks for.